Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you how to do the glazing technique of Sgraffito. If you've ever done scratch art where you have like that black paper and you use a sharp tool and you scratch it away and then you see the white underneath, Sgraffito is the same basic process but on clay. Sgraffito is an Italian word that means to scratch. It's very fun to say. And I'm going to show you a couple examples. What you do is you're going to overglaze your piece of clay, which my students have already done. So this is purple overglaze on white clay, and then you scratch the overglaze off the surface to reveal the color of the clay beneath. So you can see I've scratched away, done some hatching to show some variation here. I have another piece, if I don't knock that one over in the process, here, and you can see I've done a little bit more work on this one as far as removing a little more material. I've got leaves, branch, background. Over time, as I've done more of this with students, I've kind of come to the conclusion that about 50% of the work having glaze on it and about 50% having glaze removed is a really lovely balance between the positive and negative spaces. Here you can see I removed the background and I left the overglaze on the foreground, and this is the piece I actually demo in the video. Sit back, relax. It's a really fun process. If you like drawing, you're really going to love doing this on your clay work. If you don't like to draw, maybe instead of doing a realistic thing, you do patterns instead, and just take your time with it, have some fun. It's a great technique. I drew out my design on a piece of paper, and then I'm going to use a dull pencil to press that design into the pre-underglazed piece. You want to have about 2 coats of underglaze on top of your leather hard clay. When you press, you want to press just hard enough to dent the clay underneath. Honestly, it's kind of hard to see once you are done tracing, but it is quite helpful to have that design drawn out. You can kind of see those dents there. Now what I'm doing is I'm using the sharp tip of the curved blade to kind of create an edge around all of my pieces. I'll be scratching off the surface of the black underglaze in the background so that my background is white and the items in the foreground, the vine and the bird, are overall black. I want to have a nice edge that I can scratch up to around each of these items, so I'm just taking my time to have a really careful line around each piece. Use just the tip of your tool and scratch just deep enough to remove the underglaze, but not so deep that you're carving into the clay itself. With the position of my hand, I tend to like the curved blade of the Sgraffito tools the best, but some folks prefer the arrowhead blade, which is on the other end of this. Now I'm using that same curved blade to do what it's meant to do, and that is remove larger pieces of clay. You'll see I'll start my edge of my blade at the edge of my cut lines around my objects, and I'm just scraping the surface of the clay or the underglaze off of the clay. I am trying not to go so deep that I'm gouging the clay. I want to leave a little bit of that black tone in the underglaze. I like the look for this piece of that. Be careful as you go up to your edges. You want to just touch that cut edge and then pull away from it. That's why I'm turning this piece around and around as I work. It allows me to pull towards myself, which is a better stroke than pushing away or pulling away from myself. You'll also note that I'm not brushing off the surface of my clay with my fingers. I'll kind of pick it up and shake it, and I'll use my Sgraffito tool to pick up little edges. Now what I'm doing is I'm going around and I'm cleaning up the edges of my piece, trying to have nice clean edges all the way around the vine and all the way around the crow. At this point I'm going in and I'm starting to carve in the details within my crow itself. I'm continuing to use that same curved blade. I probably should have switched to the arrowhead blade. It would have probably made a cleaner line, but like I said, the position of my hand seems to work well with this curved tool. I am going into the line here and I'm kind of breaking the line apart so it feels like there's feathers, and then I'll start applying feather texture as little dashes or hatches into the head of the bird. As I work down the bird, my hatch gets a little larger, and where I want it to appear that light is hitting the bird, I have more hatches, and where I want it to appear like there's shadows, I will have less hatches. As I go down into the wing of the bird, I wanted to give the impression of some larger feathers, so I'm scratching those into the surface as well. And as always, I'm not scratching too deep. I'm taking my time, trying to have more underglaze, more underglaze removed in the areas that would be hit by light. And I'm consistently going around and trying to clean edges and clean things up. I decided that around the vine it would work better if I saw a little bit more of the lightness of the clay. So I am going in there and removing a little bit of the dirtier, slightly underglazed clay around it just to increase that contrast. And you can see that lightening up around the vine, which allows us to see that vine a little bit better. So I'm going to work around the vine to create better contrast. I'm really working on detailing right now, making sure my edges are clean, making sure I have contrast where I want it, making sure the shapes that I'm seeing are the shapes that I want to see, and feeling good about the overall piece. One thing to note is if you do use your fingers to try to brush off those little gumbly bits of clay, they're going to mush into the surface, and you're also going to get that clay dust on top of your underglaze, and that can fire on and leave kind of a smudge. So please be sure to not wipe those bits off. You either pull them off with the Sgraffito tool, or at the end you'll see me use a very clean, very soft brush to brush off the surface of my clay. Here I'm adding a highlight to the beak and just trying to bring out kind of a lighter areas on the bird itself to indicate form a little bit and light source. There we go, brushing off the little clay bits, doing final cleanups, and then I'm just going to make sure the back of the piece is clean. I'll sign my name and then I'll be done. It's a really fun process. I thoroughly enjoy the process of Sgraffito. I think it's a great way to add detail to clay pieces, and I've always been drawn to the Sgraffito work of other artists as well. I highly encourage you to look up some work in this style to get inspired and give it a try. It's quite fun.